Back in May we marvelled at the wild crabapple in flower, its blossoming beauty one reason for its elevation to the top rank of trees in Gaelic Ireland and for its prominence in mythology. But the main reason for the elevated status of the apple in early Ireland wasn't its flowers, but its fruit. However, when the laws of early Ireland were being formulated in the Middle Ages, it wasn't the bitter crabapple of Irish woods that was elevated to noble status, but the sweet cultivated apples that had reached Ireland long before the Brehon laws were written down, possibly as far back as 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and were cultivated in orchards that were status symbols of the prosperous, well-managed medieval farmstead. Here is an account of the house of Creja, which was one such house, and this is an idealised description of the hospitality expected of a prosperous medieval Irish homestead. There was a vat made of princely bronze, out of which runs the juice of merry malt. Over the vat stands an apple tree with the multitude of its heavy fruits. The apples fall down into the vat, and each has a drink of ale and an apple, when Creja's horn is filled with the vat's potent mead. The seeds of these planted trees escape from their orchards into the woods from time to time, where you would think they might hybridize with their wild Irish sylvestris cousin. But all attempts to cross cultivated apple varieties with the wild crabapple have proved to be, literally, fruitless. As we saw back in May, apples don't breed true. If you have a tree that produces particularly desirable fruit, you can propagate it only from cuttings, not from seed. And they are genetically enormously variable in their fruit, selection of which over all the centuries since domestication have resulted in no fewer than 2,000 cultivars or named varieties in Britain and Ireland today, and 25,000 worldwide. Cultivated apples originated in a mountainous area on the borders of Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan and China, known as the Tian Shan, northwest of the Central Asian deserts, a sort of ecological Shangri-La, what little remains of which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an area of wild fruit forest in which many species of wild apples of great genetic diversity were abundant, ranging from species with berry-like fruits no bigger than haws, to apples that would not look out of place in a supermarket today. These early garden apples, domesticated as long as 7,000 years ago, made their way westwards into Europe from China along the ancient trade routes we know as the Silk Roads, which grew up along what had originally been animal migration corridors. Sometimes they became established as deliberate introductions, but also on occasion from seeds in the droppings of horses, in whose diet wild apples were an important element when they travelled through the Tian Shan. It seems rather appropriate that the field of our splendid flowering wild apple near Birr is being grazed today by horses. Back in May we saw how in the flower of the apple, the receptacle, that's the top of the flower stalk on which the floral organs develop, the sepals, petals, stamens and carpels. The receptacle grows up around the rest of the flower to swallow up the ovary. And then after fertilization, as the seeds develop, that enclosing tissue swells and becomes sweet to become the fruit designed to attract the animals, including ourselves, which will disperse the fruits. This star-like structure on top of the apple is what little remains of the 5 sepals, and in the centre of the stamens. Then, when we cut the apple in two, we can see the ovary enveloped in the pulpy tissue of the swollen receptacle. We might note in passing that something similar happens in hawthorn and in roses. There are numerous references to apples in the lives of the old Irish saints, in place names, even in the annals of Ireland. And They were stored for winter use, which was particularly important in an age when there was very little in the way of vegetables and fruit. The wild crabapple was also valued in medicine, and the early Irish physicians were well aware of the difference between sweet apples and the wild crab apples. Let me read this for you. This is a translation of a prescription from the Irish Herbal of the physician Taig O'Queen, which was compiled from Latin sources around 1415. Let me read this for you. Nahula Feehan, that is crab apples. Take these wild apples and the soft shoots of bramble. Pound them and boil them in vinegar and apply it to the kidneys or the groin, and it will help with dysentery. Sweet apples, Nahula Milshi. Sweet apples create a great deal of windiness. The styptic wild apples should be given after food, raw or cooked. They greatly serve to people recovering from illness who have indigestion in their stomachs. And they should be given as follows. That is, cut the apples across, take out the pips that are inside, and fill with these powders. Powder of cloves, nutmeg, and lignum aloes. And if these are not to be had, put in powder of cumin on its own, or pepper. Roast them and eat them after meals, and this will greatly comfort the digestion. And also, if the pulp of the same apple be roasted and mixed with alum and borax and put on canker, it will help with it for sure, as we have said.